Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu, melech ha'olam, asher keshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzavanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Hashem our God, ruler of the universe, who has sanctified us with commandments and commanded us to study words of Torah. Let's begin, and quite an extensive reading today as we read the Torah portion together. Shemot, Exodus, Parashah 13, chapters 1, verse 1 to chapter 6, verse 1. These are the names of the sons of Israel who came into Egypt with Yaakov. Each man came with his household. Reuben, Shimon, Levi, Yehuda, Yishakar, Zebulun, Binyamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. All told, there were 70 descendants of Yaakov. Joseph was already in Egypt. Joseph died, as did all his brothers and all that generation. The descendants of Israel were fruitful, increased abundantly, multiplied, and grew very powerful. The land became filled with them. Now there arose a new king over Egypt. He knew nothing about Joseph, but said to his people, "Look, the descendants of Israel have become a people too numerous and powerful for us. Come, let's use wisdom in dealing with them. Otherwise, they'll continue to multiply. And in the event of war, they might ally themselves with our enemies, fight against us, and leave the land altogether." So they put slave masters over them to oppress them with forced labor. And they built for Pharaoh the storage cities of Pithom and Ramesses. But the more the Egyptians oppressed them, the more they multiplied and expanded, until the Egyptians came to dread the people of Israel and worked them relentlessly, making their lives bitter with hard labor, digging clay, making bricks, all kinds of field work. And in all this toil, they were shown no mercy. Moreover, the king of Egypt spoke to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was called Shiphrah and the other Puah. "When you attend the Hebrew women and see them giving birth," he said, "if it's a boy, kill him. But if it's a girl, let her live." However, the midwives were God-fearing women, so they didn't do as the king of Egypt ordered them, but let the boys live. The king of Egypt summoned the midwives and demanded of them, "Why have you done this and let the boys live?" The midwives answered Pharaoh, "It's because the Hebrew women aren't like the Egyptian women. They go into labor and give birth before the midwife arrives." Therefore, God prospered the midwives, and the people continued to multiply and grow very powerful. Indeed, because the midwives feared God, He made them founders of families. Then Pharaoh gave this order to all his people: "Every boy that is born, throw in the river, but let all the girls live. Chapter 2. A man from the family of Levi took a woman, also descended from Levi, as his wife. When she conceived and had a son, upon seeing what a fine child he was, she hid him for 3 months. When she could no longer hide him, she took a papyrus basket, coated it with clay and tar, put the child in it, and placed it among the reeds on the riverbank. His sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to him. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe in the river, while her maids and attendants walked along the riverside. Spotting the basket among the reeds, she sent her slave girl to get it. She opened it and looked inside, and there, in front of her, was a crying baby boy. Moved with pity, she said, "This must be one of the Hebrews' children." At this point, his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Would you like me to go and find you one of the Hebrew women to nurse the baby for you?" Pharaoh's daughter answered, "Yes, go." So the girl went and called the baby's own mother. Pharaoh's daughter told her, "Take this child away and nurse it for me, and I will pay you for doing it." So the woman took the child and nursed it. Then when the child had grown some, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and she began to raise him as her son. She called him Moshe. Moses means pull out. Explaining, because I pulled him out of the water. One day, when Moshe was a grown man, he went out to visit his kinsmen, and he watched them struggling at forced labor. He saw an Egyptian strike a Hebrew, one of his kinsmen. He looked this way and that, and when he saw that no one was around, he killed the Egyptian and hid his body in the sand. The next day he went out and saw 2 Hebrew men fighting with each other. To the one in the wrong, he said, "Why are you hitting your companion?" He retorted, "Who appointed you ruler and judge over us? Do you intend to kill me the way you killed the Egyptian?" Moshe became frightened. Clearly, he thought, the matter has become known. When Pharaoh heard of it, he tried to have Moshe put to death. But Moshe fled from Pharaoh to live in the land of Midian. One day, as he was sitting by a well, the 7 daughters of the priest of Midian came to draw water. They had filled the troughs to water their father's sheep. When the shepherds came and tried to drive them away, but Moshe got up and defended them. Then he watered their sheep. When they came to Reuel, their father, he said, "How come you're back so soon today?" They answered, "An Egyptian rescued us from the shepherds. More than that, he drew water for us and watered the sheep." He asked his daughters, "Where is he? Why did you leave the man there? Invite him to have something to eat." Moshe was glad to stay on with the man. And he gave Moshe his daughter, Zipporah, in marriage. She gave birth to a son, and he named him Gershom, foreigner there. For he said, I have been a foreigner in a foreign land. Sometime during those many years, the king of Egypt died, but the people of Israel still groaned under the yoke of slavery, and they cried out, and their cry for rescue from slavery came up to God. God heard their groaning, and God remembered his covenant with Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov. God saw the people of Israel, and God acknowledged them. Chapter 3. Now, Moshe was tending the sheep of Yitro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. Leading the flock to the far side of the desert, he came to the mountain of God, to Horeb. The angel of Adonai appeared to him in a fire, blazing from the middle of a bush. He looked and saw that although the bush was flaming with fire, yet the bush was not being burned up. Moshe said, I'm going to go over and see this amazing sight and find out why the bush isn't being burned up. When Adonai saw that he had gone over to see, God called to him from the middle of the bush, Moshe, Moshe. He answered, Here I am. He said, Don't come any closer. Take your sandals off your feet, because the place where you are standing is holy ground. I am the God of your father, he continued, the God of Abraham, the God of Yitzhak, and the God of Yaakov. Moshe covered his face because he was afraid to look at God. Adonai said, I have seen how my people are being oppressed in Egypt and heard their cry for release from their slave masters, because I know their pain. I have come down to rescue them from the Egyptians and to bring them up out of that country to a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the place of the Canaanite, Hittite, Amori, Perizi, Hivi, and Yevusi. Yes, the cry of the people of Israel has come to me, and I have seen how terribly the Egyptians oppress them. Therefore, now, come, and I will send you to Pharaoh, so that you can lead my people, the descendants of Israel, out of Egypt. Moshe said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and lead the people of Israel out of Egypt? He replied, I will surely be with you. Your sign that I have sent you will be that when you have led the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Moshe said to God, Look, when I appear before the people of Israel and say to them, the God of your ancestors has sent me to you, and they ask me, What is his name? What am I to tell them? God said to Moshe, Ehyeh asher ehyeh. I am. And added, Here is what to say to the people of Israel. Ehyeh, I am, has sent me to you. God said further to Moshe, Say this to the people of Israel, Yod-Heh-Vah-Heh, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Yitzhak, and the God of Yaakov has sent me to you. This is my name forever. This is how I am to be remembered, generation after generation. Go, gather the leaders of Israel together and say to them, Adonai, the God of your fathers, the God of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, has appeared to me and said, I've been paying close attention to you and have seen what is being done to you in Egypt. And I have said that I will lead you up out of the misery of Egypt to the land of the Canaanite, Hitti, Amori, Perizi, Hivi, and Yevusi, to a land flowing with milk and honey. They will heed what you say. Then you will come, you and the leaders of Israel, before the king of Egypt, and you will tell him, Adonai, the God of the Hebrews, has met with us. Now please, let us go 3 days' journey into the desert so that we can sacrifice to Adonai, our God. I know that the king of Egypt will not let you leave unless he is forced to do so. But I will reach out my hand and strike Egypt with all my wonders that I will do there. After that, he will let you go. Moreover, I will make the Egyptians so well disposed toward the people that when you go, you won't go empty-handed. Rather, all the women will ask their neighbors and house guests for silver and gold jewelry and clothing with which you will dress your own sons and daughters. In this way, you will plunder the Egyptians. Chapter 4. Moshe replied, but I'm certain they won't believe me, and they won't listen to what I say, because they'll say, Adonai did not appear to you. Adonai answered him, what is that in your hand? And he said, a staff. He said, throw it on the ground. And he threw it on the ground. It turned into a snake, and Moshe recoiled from it. Then Adonai said to Moshe, put out your hand and take it by the tail. He reached out with his hand and took hold of it, and it became a staff in his hand. This is so that they will believe that Adonai, the God of their fathers, the God of Abraham, the God of Yitzhak, and the God of Yaakov, has appeared to you. Furthermore, Adonai said to him, now, put your hand inside your coat. He put his hand in his coat, and when he took it out, his hand was leprous, as white as snow. Then God said, now, put your hand back in your coat. He put his hand back in his coat, and when he took it out, it was as healthy as the rest of his body. If they won't believe you or heed the evidence of the first sign, they will be convinced by the second. But if they aren't persuaded even by both these signs and still won't listen to what you say, then take some water from the river and pour it on the ground. The water you take from the river will turn into blood on the dry land. Moshe said to Adonai, oh, Adonai, I'm a terrible speaker. I always have been, and I'm no better now. Even after you've spoken to your servant, my words come slowly. My tongue moves slowly. Adonai answered him, who gives a person a mouth? Who makes a person dumb or deaf, keen-sighted or blind? Isn't it I, Adonai? Now, therefore, go, and I will be your mouth, and will teach you what to say. But he replied, Please, Lord, send someone else. Anyone you want. At this, Adonai's anger blazed up against Moshe. He said, Don't you have a brother, Aaron, the Levi? I know that he's a good speaker. In fact, here he is now, coming out to meet you, and he'll be happy to see you. You will speak to him and put the words in his mouth, and I will be with your mouth and his, teaching you both what to do. Thus he will be your spokesman to the people, in effect, for you. He will be a mouth, and for him you will be like God. Now, take this staff in your hand, because you need it to perform the signs. Moshe left, returned to Yitro, his father-in-law, and said to him, I beg you to let me go and return to my kinsmen in Egypt to see if they are still alive. Yitro said to Moshe, Go in peace. Adonai said to Moshe in Midian, Go on back to Egypt, because all the men who wanted to kill you are dead. So Moshe took his wife and sons, put them on a donkey, and started out for Egypt. Moshe took God's staff in his hand. Adonai said to Moshe, When you get back to Egypt, make sure that you do before Pharaoh every one of the wonders I've enabled you to do. Nevertheless, I'm going to make him hard-hearted, and he will refuse to let the people go. Then you are to tell Pharaoh, Adonai says, Yisrael is my firstborn son. I have told you to let my son go in order to worship me, but you have refused to let him go. Well, then, I will kill your firstborn son. At a lodging place on the way, Adonai met Moshe and would have killed him had not Zipporah taken a flintstone and cut off the foreskin of her son. She threw it at his feet, saying, What a bloody bridegroom you are for me. But then God let Moshe be. She added, A bloody bridegroom because of the circumcision. Adonai said to Aaron, Go into the desert to meet Moshe. He went, met him at the mountain of God, and kissed him. Moshe told him everything Adonai had said in sending him, including all the signs he had ordered him to perform. Then Moshe and Aaron went and gathered together all the leaders of the people of Israel. Aaron said everything Adonai had told Moshe, who then performed the signs for the people to see. The people believed when they heard that Adonai had remembered the people of Israel and seen how they were oppressed. They bowed their heads and worshiped. Chapter 5. After that, Moshe and Aaron came and said to Pharaoh, Here is what Adonai, the God of Israel, says. Let my people go, so that they can celebrate a festival in the desert to honor me." But Pharaoh replied, "Who is Adonai that I should obey when he says to let Israel go? I don't know Adonai, and I also won't let Israel go." They said, "The God of the Hebrews has met with us. Please let us go 3 days' journey into the desert so that we can sacrifice to Adonai our God. Otherwise, he may strike us with a plague or with the sword." The king of Egypt answered them, "Moshe and Aaron, what do you mean by taking the people away from their work? Get back to your labor." "Look," Pharaoh added, "the population of the land has grown, yet you're trying to have them stop working." That same day, Pharaoh ordered the slave masters and the people's foremen, "You are no longer to provide straw for the bricks the people are making, as you did before. Let them go and gather straw for themselves. But you will require them to produce the same quantity of bricks as before. Don't reduce it, because they're lazing around. This is why they're crying, 'Let us go and sacrifice to our God.' Give these people harder work to do. That will keep them too busy to pay attention to speeches full of lies." The people's slave masters went out, their foremen too, and said to the people, "Here is what Pharaoh says. I will no longer give you straw. You go yourselves and get straw wherever you can find it, but your output is not to be reduced." So the people were dispersed throughout all the land of Egypt to gather stubble for straw. The slave masters kept pressing them, "Keep working, make your daily quota," just as when straw was provided. The foremen of the people of Israel, whom Pharaoh's slave masters had appointed to be over them, were flogged and asked, "Why haven't you fulfilled your quota of bricks yesterday and today, as you did formerly?" Then the foreman of the people of Israel came and complained to Pharaoh, "Why are you treating your servants this way? No straw is given to your servants, yet they keep telling us to make bricks. And now your servants are being flogged. But the fault lies with your own people." "Lazy," he retorted. "You're just lazy. That's why you say, 'Let us go and sacrifice to Adonai.' Get going now and get back to work. No straw will be given to you, and you will still deliver the full amount of bricks." When they said, "You are not to reduce your daily production quota of bricks," the foreman of the people of Israel could see that they were in deep trouble. As they were leaving Pharaoh, they encountered Moshe and Aaron standing by the road, and they said to them, "May Adonai look at you and judge accordingly, because you have made us utterly abhorrent in the view of Pharaoh and his servants, and you have put a sword in their hands to kill us." Moshe returned to Adonai and said, "Adonai, why have you treated this people so terribly? What has been the value of sending me? For ever since I came to Pharaoh to speak in your name, he has dealt terribly with this people, and you haven't rescued your people at all." Chapter 6. Adonai said to Moshe, Now you will see what I'm going to do to Pharaoh. With a mighty hand, he will send them off. With force, he will drive them from the land. There's so many different directions we could go with this. And I knew we wouldn't have a whole lot of time because it's pretty long reading today, pretty extensive. But Tony Robinson uses some thematic analysis that will help us out here. And in the interest of time, let me read some of this to you. He's looking at chapter 2, verses 1 through 22. And he basically breaks that down into Moses escaping death, Moses in conflict, and Moses' life in exile. So this is before he's come back to deliver God's people, because he was in exile. So Tony says these verses are thematically connected to the account of the flood. First, Moses was placed into a basket just as Noah was placed into an ark. Second, in both cases, the ones in the ark were preserved from death by water. Third, both arks were smeared with pitch. In the flood account, Adonai sends a judgment against the ungodly, preserves the righteous through the same judgment, establishes a covenant with the one saved. The ones saved go on to establish a new earth in hopes that mankind will walk according to Adonai's commandments. So, since Adonai is about to send judgment against the ungodly Egyptians, preserve the righteous Yisrael through the same judgment, establish a covenant with the saved Yisrael. The ones saved will go to a new land in hopes that mankind will walk according to Adonai's commandments. So, the thematic analysis is that Tony sees a connection here between the flood and what is going to happen in Egypt. Another thematic connection concerning the character of Moshe. We see that Moshe tries to defend the cause of the weaker, oppressed person, the one who is at a disadvantage. So he defended his kinsman who was being attacked by the Egyptian. In fact, he kills the Egyptian. And then later, he sees two Hebrews, two of his kinsmen, fighting amongst each other. And he stands up for the one against the one who has wronged the other. It's not just a fight. There's a person being oppressed. That's by one of their own. Isn't that how often oppression happens? Yeah. If you don't have the power over your oppressor, then what power you have over your own kind? Oppression continues. So we see that Moses stands up for the oppressed, which shows that Moses hates injustices, he cares for the disadvantaged, and he identifies with the weak, and he's a man of action. He takes action. He doesn't sit on his hands and do nothing. He doesn't take the safe route, which causes him to go into exile. Causes them to go into exile. Right? So we see that this is teaching us some about Moshe's character as well. Perhaps there are other thematic analyses that some of you may see. So are there other connections that you would like to reflect on?
Is this on? I mean, there's striking similarities of how they come in and go out, right, to Egypt. So, yeah, many. But I had a question, a specific question,
Okay.
between 4:23, well, say 4:22, 23, and then 4:24. It seems like a ridiculously inelegant transition between Moses talking to Yahweh at the burning bush, and you shall say to Pharaoh, thus says Yahweh Israel, my son, my firstborn, and I have said unto you, let my son go, that he may serve me, and you have refused to let him go. Behold, I'll slay your son, your firstborn. And then we jump right into, and it came to pass at a lodging place, Yahweh's going to kill Moses. So it's just very abrupt subject change where we go from this conversation to, later in the desert, God's going to kill Moses. So it's odd. I don't know why that connection's there. Obviously, there's something chiastic about it to make it necessary. I don't know where the reflection of it is.
So you're talking chapter 4, verse 22?
24, basically.
That section there where Adonai is telling him that, as he says at the end here, that Israel is his firstborn son. Israel is my firstborn son. And then he says, I will kill your firstborn son. Right? That's the message that's going to come. And then, the very next verse, at the lodging place or on the road, Moshe is traveling with his family. One son is mentioned. The firstborn son is there, obviously. I believe there's another son as well. But so the question here then is you're asking why it seems like a change. Why the shift here? And I think that's good because it's not, in the Hebrew, it's not precisely identified who is the one God intends to kill here. Now, most translations, the English translations, assume that it's Moses. But it could be Moses' firstborn son that God intends to kill, which follows connection with killing Egypt, Egyptian's firstborn son.
Yeah, I can see a connection there.
Okay. But obviously,
Another connection.
Yeah, okay.
He's uncircumcised.
The what?
He's an uncircumcised child.
Yes.
So he's being targeted as if he's an Egyptian. That's the connection.
Yeah, okay. So
who's the Egyptian and who's the Hebrew here? So Moses is wandering back into Israel as an Egyptian, or back into Egypt as an Egyptian, as opposed to a Hebrew. Something like that.
Yeah, that's true. And there is some question as to what Moshe is trying to do here, because, let's face it, is Moshe eager to follow God's plan here, or is he reluctant to follow God's plan?
He's reluctant, yeah.
Yeah, he's reluctant. And he has some fears. And God actually addresses these. And they're natural fears. We can understand that. He doesn't realize that all those that are seeking his life are dead. God tells him that. It's not like a side, oh, by the way, I should have told you this earlier, Moshe, but your fears are unfounded. Those that are seeking your life are no longer living. But no, he gives that at that time because it seems like Moses is kind of dragging his feet here a bit because he comes to Yitro, who's the priest of Midian, and he doesn't tell him what happened on the mountain. Doesn't appear like he says, look, God has revealed to me that I'm going to confront Pharaoh of Egypt and lead my kinsmen out of that. No, he says, I just want to go and check on my family, see if they're still living, in Egypt. So that's not quite the same thing that God told him, Kevin. And
well, even so, I struggled with it almost kind of sounded arrogant on Moses' part. How would he, when he thought that these two people that he was going to help, the one being oppressed, that they would see as their now leader because he's did what he did, but yet they still see him as an Egyptian. And part of me thinks to myself, why would he think that? I mean, is that the Egyptian in him thinking I can control anything? Because part of me is they've been oppressed for all these years by all these leaders, and he's one of them. How could just a one event convince them that he's going to lead them out? Or do you know what I'm saying? And so part of that is does he have a lot of that Egyptian still in him, which is maybe why he's still struggling? Can I say, if I put it in my terms, do I want Babylon or do I want Israel?
So I have a thematic connection here, I think, between Moses killing the Egyptian here, because it just kind of, it says, where am I? Okay. One day when Moses had grown up, he went out to his people and looked on their burdens, and he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, and he looked this way and that way, and then he killed the Hebrew. The thematic connection here, I think, goes back to Levi and Simeon, and when Jacob blesses his children, he says that Simeon and Levi are brothers of brothers. There's weapons of violence in their sword. It says in their anger they killed men, and since Moses is a descendant of Levi, I feel like there's that generational continuing, they're kind of quick to anger, and I think it just kind of follows him through his life when they're in the wilderness, and God tells Moses to go up and speak to the rock. He was angry with Israel. And he went up and he hit the rock, and then God punished him for that, for disobeying. But it was his anger against Israel at that point that caused that. And I think there's just a thematic connection through that in his life of back to Levi.
Okay. Yeah, it's good.
Can I make a couple of comments about this? In the early chapters, remember, Pharaoh's daughter draws Moses out of the Nile, which seems a rather impetuous act to us since she's disobeying her own father, who has despised the Hebrews. But in contemporary accounts of Egypt, there are other impetuous acts done by daughters of Pharaoh, different pharaohs. So her disobedience of her own father is not unusual. It's more characteristic of royal women at the time, since she was a princess of the king. And another thing to understand about this is, there's been a linguistic analysis done of all of the book of Exodus that has shown that in the book of Exodus, about 6% of the words used in this book are loan words from contemporary Egyptian language. Words like we saw Pharaoh, or not Pharaoh, but Moses, which is an Egyptian loan word, meaning pulled out or drawn out. The word Pharaoh, a number of the words used for jewels later in Aaron's breastplate are also Egyptian loan words. So when they're pronounced in Hebrew, these loan words sound just like the contemporary Egyptian words, meaning the same thing. So it's an indicator to us that the book of Exodus is authentic and historical. And what it is describing, it was not made up by anyone. It is factual. And that's one reason why it has by far the highest percentage of Egyptian loanwords of any book in the Bible. And a third thing to understand about this is Moses, when he says, he refuses to go, and when God sends him, and he says, he describes his speaking ability as poor, it appears that from contemporary analysis, say speaking in our brains is a left brain activity. We have two hemispheres in our brain. Singing is a right brain activity. So when we're singing, most of that sound or driving our singing is from the right side of our brain. So it's been found that in people who stutter, who, when they're speaking, they're stuttering. Typically, when they're singing, they're not stuttering. And you're probably aware of some people who are like that. So it appears that when Moses in Hebrew says, I have a heavy mouth, that's what he said to God. It appears that Moses had a problem with stuttering. And so Moses was embarrassed to go before Pharaoh, even though he was, from the royal family, having been Pharaoh's daughter's adopted son. We can see, for example, late in the book of Deuteronomy, a whole chapter is spent where Moses sings to Israel. So he's singing without stuttering. But in an analysis of most of the times when Moses and Aaron are going before Pharaoh, it's Aaron who's doing the speaking, and only occasionally is Moses himself speaking, and only for short segments. So it appears that Moses was still embarrassed as a person who stuttered, but when he sang to Israel, and there's some 2 or 3 instances where he did sing to them, he did not stutter, and that's all I want to say.
Very good, thank you. We probably are out of time, but as you were speaking there with that, I would just like to draw your attention to one more thing. I'm not going to say it's a thematic analysis per se, but maybe you can reflect upon it. It was the women who enabled God's plan to work here. Shifra and Puah, the midwives, they're mentioned by name. Although Pharaoh's daughter, the princess, not mentioned by name, she had a very important part to play. Along with that was Moses' sister Miriam, who was on the lookout for him and was the one that seized the opportunity for Moses to be nursed by his own mother. And that impact, Moses' mother, the impact that she had on him is obvious as well during the time of his nursing and weaning. Right? And then we have Zipporah, Moshe's wife. She comes to the rescue here of his firstborn son by performing the circumcision, the Brit Milah. And in fact, Rashi uses this instance in Scripture as justification for a woman to be permitted to perform the Brit Milah, which I think even to this day is, as far as I understand, is only done in the Jewish Orthodox by men. And for many, many centuries, that this was not considered, traditionally is not considered something that a woman could do. But Rashi makes the point that she can, and because she did. Moses' own firstborn son, and saved his life. Whether saved his life means saved Moses' life or saved her firstborn son's life in that case. Okay. Thank you for your attention. God bless you. Shabbat shalom.